James, you talk about waking up from the repetitive nature of life. Why do you think so many people accept a life they don't love as if it's the only one available to them?
Oh man, I did that for years. I did that for years. Why do we do that? I think there's a lot of reasons, but so much is it's a little bit like how do you tell a fish that they're wet? A lot of times, we just don't see the environment that we are living in. And what we all we feel is maybe some discontent or some things that are not right. But then we think, well, I just got to keep grinding through this and keep going because after all, isn't that what life's about? Life's not easy. Just keep going. Don't quit. So I think there's a lot of societal messages, but the bigger reason, Daniel, that keeps us stuck in the path we're on that maybe that we don't like is simply we're afraid. We're afraid to make the change, and we're afraid of what the tribe will think of us if we do.
Hmm. But do you think I can relate a lot to that because to me I felt lost. I felt I was living a life I didn't like, and until I had to go through extreme amount of pain and obstacles, and then I start turning my life around. But do you think that living in fear or being afraid all the time is it's almost like by design from an evolutionary standpoint? We're talking about that that's how we made it this far. But it seems to me, and I'm probably going very deep into something that I was hoping to get later on, but it's the first thought it came to mind, that because of our negativity bias, that's how we live life, and we don't understand, or we or many people don't know that the nervous system is still stuck thousands of or even millions of years ago, and it hasn't evolved to a point where we don't have to be afraid all the time. I mean, there's not a real reason to be afraid all the time. Nothing bad is going to happen, and yet our bodies and our brains are trying to keep us safe. Is that a main reason why people seem to just accept, okay, this is my cross to bear, there's nothing else I can do?
That's part of it. I mean, one piece, so I'll come back to that, but one piece is also that sometimes it just takes a few years for us to figure out what we want to do in life. So a lot of times we're going through our 20s and we're just running the programs. Let me get through school. Let me get a job. Let me hope that my dad's proud of me, right? Calling back to home to tell mom that I got a new deal or whatever it might be. We're still so stuck in sort of the original programming. So it's not till a little bit later, and that's I think why people get into these ideas of a midlife crisis, that we have this collision of selves. That's what Dr. James Hollis calls it, right? We've got the self that we've just always known as us, but then all of a sudden this other self comes in, and there's a collision, and that other self is that voice, the soul, the psyche that's like, hey, I don't know that we want to do this. I don't know that we want to be a financial planner. I don't know that we want to be a doctor or whatever it might be. But just even those questions alone then cause us to think like, yeah, but I've been doing this, or if you also we could throw in the sunken cost bias, right? Like, well, I've already graduated in this. I've got to keep going, and that becomes difficult. To your point, though, about the evolution, and for sure, and layer on top of that, whatever your formative programming was in your early years, right? We're just all trying to be safe, be loved, have someone feed us. And so we learn all these habits and patterns, as you know, that puts us in these loops. So, and then some people like myself who struggled with anxiety for a lot of life, and then it just almost becomes the default. But it really doesn't matter where you start. What's important is that you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm not as in control of my life as I think. In other words, there's sort of a shadow government or a deep state, if you will, that pulls the strings behind the scenes when we're talking about what's inside of us. And when we start to go, okay, I've got to start to get intentional about how I want to live my life. And it first starts with, well, what do I want? And that's often the most difficult question to answer. Like, what do you want? And often people go, what do you mean, what do you want? No, what do you want? Like, what am I allowed to want? No, what do you want? What do you want in life? Well, I'm not sure. We know what we don't want, right? That's easy. Well, I don't want this, 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 and this. Okay, but what do you want? And you can't answer that question until you get quiet and go within and sit with that for a while. It doesn't just happen like in a moment. So that's where it starts. It's getting clear on what do you want now. Let's get intentional how we get there and what's going to stop us.
I love everything that you said. I'm going to address, I'm going to put in a box here the sunk cost fallacy. I'll address it in a minute. But starting from your last point that you made, that it is hard to know what we really want. And I experienced that for many years. I didn't think, I mean, for my first, 31, 32 years of my life, I didn't know what I wanted. It was like, because I had conditioned myself of not even thinking about or putting myself as a priority. It's like, okay, exactly what do I want? But I do believe that the way that we've been taught or conditioned, I like to use this example. Imagine that you are at an ice cream shop, and the guy is asking, "Okay, James, what flavor do you want?" And you say, "Well, I don't want coconut. I don't want chocolate. I don't want strawberry. I don't want vanilla. I don't." Okay, cool. What flavor do you want? Well, I don't want this. I'm like, okay, but that's not the question. The question is, what do you want? And it is scary. I think that's part of scary because we have, as you said, we have never asked ourselves a question, and sometimes we it's hard to tell, is this what I want, what I truly want, or this is what I want based on what society wants me to want. And it's very tricky to really know exactly the difference, because sure, we might want to have the house or the car or the relationship or the money or the status, sure. But what lights us up inside? And as you mentioned, the sunk cost fallacy, that is one of the hardest things to do, because imagine it's like, I've invested so much time, effort, money, whether it's in a relationship, a job, in a city, anywhere, and you feel like, okay, that would be a failure. I'm so much invested that I cannot start something new. But if we see life as chapters, so maybe that chapter is, it got to an end and you need to start a new one, and just take, it's not a failure, just take the wisdom and the lessons you learn from that chapter and start over. Having yeah, I went on a tangent there, but combining those two, one, that people, it's hard for people to truly know what they want, and also the sunken fallacy that keeps them stuck in a life that they don't love. What do you think is the most subtle sign that people can pay attention to or become aware that they're living in autopilot and living a life that they don't truly want? Because again, when we feel miserable or when we feel that we don't like something, as you said, well, this is just life. Life is hard. Life is supposed to be like this. I'm waiting until I'm 80 or 90 and died, and that's it. What can they start paying attention to realize, wait, I can change this?
Yeah, such great questions. And when we get stuck in this thing of what do I want, often what we're thinking is, what do I want to do, right? What do I want to do? What's the job? What's the career? But if we can step back from that for a moment, because here's the thing, I believe your purpose in life is you, right? That your purpose in life is actually to bring that essence, I'm going to use the word soul. Your soul seeks expansion, expression through you, right? That's what it wants. It's like the seed of an oak tree, just wants to become an oak tree, right? That's its expression. Now, as an oak tree, it's going to do a lot of things, but it's not setting out like, my goal is to, be a home for small animals and stop erosion. No, it just wants to become something. So one of the things we can do is to take a step back from careers and then think, wait a minute, what do I want my life to feel like? Because so much of how we evaluate our life is really just how we feel about our life, right? What do I want my life to feel like? What are the dominant emotions I want to live with? And in addition to that, what are the things that are most important to me that I want to make sure I'm doing? So for me, I want to be a good father to my adult children. I want to create wealth so that I can take care of my kids, so I have freedom to travel. I want to be healthy. I want to live in alignment with my soul and use those gifts. So when you start looking at life from that perspective, we've taken job out of it, because when you start to get clear on, this is what I call like your spiritual compass, right? When you create this spiritual compass that gives you that true north, it's not attached to any vocation or even activity per se. But now, when I'm clear on that, I can probably do 500 different jobs and be super fulfilled in my life. But it starts with, but what kind of life do I want to live? How do I want friends or no friends? Do I want meaningful work or not meaningful work, right? Some of the basic things. Okay, well, once I'm clear on that, now I can get intentional on doing stuff. So I think one of the challenges, and back to your ice cream analogies, we come in ice cream and it's like if they said, well, you can only have one flavor. We have 1,000, but you can only have one scoop of one flavor. Well, can I have 2 scoops of 2 flavors in the bowl? No, only one. That's a little bit like our society. And it was easier when I was younger. There was less complexity, right? There was like, it seemed like there was 10 jobs you could do and that was it. Nowadays, for young people, there's a gazillion things and it's almost paralyzing. Like, what should I do? The better question to ask is, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be in this world? What should my life feel like? Okay, great. Now from there, we can start asking the question, what are some of the things I'd like to do that would help me fulfill that?
You had a couple of phrases or words like soul alignment and spiritual compass, and I understood what you meant. I understood. I because I've experienced that as well. What I do believe that for some people is hard to understand or to wrap their head around those concepts, and we'll touch them in a minute. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that it's not only that people need the knowledge, but truly they need the understanding of what that means or what they're supposed to feel or what they're supposed to look for. Because I do believe that in order for people to get to that point, they need a higher level of consciousness, a higher level of awareness, and it's kind of hard because we live in a very distracted world that people trying to numb any negative emotions, any feelings, any sensations. People don't want to be with them with themselves because it's scary. It is overwhelming. But also at the same time, I like that you brought up the point that we have so many different options, so many things that we want or that we could do, that is overwhelming. And I think our brains were not designed to have so many options. So the way that I've done it, and this is for people that if they want to try it, is we need to add constraints in our life. Just so imagine if I have 8 different options of things to buy or things to eat or things to do or for job, I start pairing in two. Okay, between option A, option B, what do I want? Okay, I choose one and then go to the second one. And then I go from A to 4, 2, back to 1. And that sort of helps people to understand, okay, let me find one thing out of many um, desires or passions I have that I can focus on that will be fulfilling to me. Now, having said that, going back to that point of soul alignment or a spiritual compass, that you feel it within you, because it's something that I cannot even describe. At least I don't have the language for it. When you know deep inside, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is where I'm supposed. This is my path. How can people start tuning more inwards and understand or be more attuned with their body and their internal world to a point that they can figure it out or listen to that voice, listen to that intuition, listen to their soul, listen to their higher self, the universe, God, however you want to call it, and start following a life that they're meant to live?
Yeah. Well, I ignored that nudge for a lot of years. And sometimes it shows up as anxiety, sometimes depression, sometimes just a deadness, right? A deadness. Um, because life, even when you're doing what you might feel called to do, doesn't mean it's going to be easy all the time. It's difficult
No.
times. right? It's difficult times, there's fear, but those are all fine emotions. It doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. When you feel dead inside, right? And you've felt dead for a while. So let's say in a certain job, maybe you work at a hospital and you're dead. Well, okay, it's hard to come back from that. And that's probably hard to come back from that, meaning like, let me just bring back to life my passion for this thing that I'm doing. So, um, back to this idea of how do you listen? What's worked best for me? Because when we're so busy and we have no time, it's to me listening to the soul is a little bit like I grew up on a cattle ranch, and there would be these little animals that would go down in their hole. If they saw you, they would be spooked and they would go down, and you'd have to wait a long time for them to come back up. Sometimes I feel like the voice of the soul is like that. There's just so much clutter and it just needs space. And this is why when you're on a holiday or you're away from your environment, that then suddenly we start to ask those questions. So for me, it's not only creating space, but also getting out into nature. So some of the biggest decisions I've made in my life that I was resisting making them, I made them once I got into the mountains, into nature, into a forest, beside a stream, and then asked myself, hey, what do I really want to do? And I'm not going to judge the answer, but what is it that I want? And then, bam, like lightning, sometimes that answer can come.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe that clarity comes from stillness, but we have to have the courage to be in that state. But also, what I like that you said when you were up the mountains and then you asked, what do I really want? And I'm not going to judge it. It is so easy to judge our thoughts, to judge our passions, to judge our desires, to judge our emotions. And what I found, at least for myself, is it requires a mental effort sometimes not to judge it, because that is automatically where we're going. And the moment that you start judging, you're signaling your body, your subconscious mind, that it's not safe to even share that. So you're even blocking yourself by judging the thought or the emotion or the feeling or anything. I think that's why people keep their feelings or the emotions repressed in their body, because their body doesn't feel safe enough to release them. But now, what do you think? I do believe that because I share with you off cameras and I've shared on the podcast as well that all this new life I'm living, it came after my divorce. It came after just asking myself what I truly want. My life turned upside down. I never saw it coming. But even right before my marriage fell apart, I was in deep depression. And I think it was my intuition, my soul, my higher self just telling me, this is not the life you're supposed to live. You're not supposed to live that. And once I started doing the changes, as you said, life is hard. It's been scary. It's been painful that I went all in with this project, with the life I'm envisioning now, that after 32 years, I finally had clarity of what I wanted to do with my life. Call it lucky or unlucky, I don't know. It's just maybe both or neither, that I never had a true direction in my life until this happened. The good thing, I guess, is just once I had it, okay, I'm going for it. But if I had different directions, then we go back to the sunk cost fallacy. For 10 years, I did one thing and now I'm starting over and then I get too much in my head. But what do you think, at least in your experience, either in your own personal life or people that you have helped, friends or coach, what's the moment of truth that often pushes someone to finally wake up?
That would probably be different for a lot of people. For some, it's a health crisis. For some, the body eventually is like joins the soul in protest and says, "No, we're not going to do this anymore." Um, I think I love the quote by Dr. James Hollis when he says, "When the path is right, the energy is there." And so the opposite of that, of course, would be when the path's not right, the energy is just not there. And I would think, even in your story, Daniel, I love your story in that you just made this decision like, hey, I want to do this. I feel called to do this. And I would even say that this is one vehicle for you, but there's there's a layer beneath this for you of what it is that the podcast so fires you up, right? And brings you energy. But that if all of a sudden tomorrow you couldn't do the podcast, the secret, it's not like you just lost your calling. No, the secret is the things that you bring to the world because of the podcast, you will find another way to bring them to the world in a different context. That really is that underlying soul, and it's the soul's intent to seek expression through you, right? But right now in your life, it's the podcast. And so what happens for people is, again, it's a little bit like I got to find my calling. It's like I got to find my soulmate. Well, you can go on a lot of dates with a lot of people that actually could have been amazing partners, but if you're thinking, no, there's one, and no, there's probably a lot, some better than others for you, and you better for them. But again, it's that underneath thing. What is it? Even for you about the podcast, is it a combination of that? You love to learn, you love serving other people, you love helping people make changes in their life, right? So whatever those data points are, this vehicle of the podcast is a perfect wrapper for that. But there's also other wrappers that maybe you'll do later in your life. Who knows? The key is that we want to get clear about what is trying to seek expression through me. What is it that gives me energy? And then let me start to experiment and try different things. So I think I've probably gotten off track on your original question, which was about how do we know when the soul's giving us a nudge. I think it's in those quiet moments when we can have a quiet moment and then there's somewhat of a discontent, right? Again, not that, oh man, this is hard, this has been a tough time. When you got young kids and everyone's tired, right? But I'm talking about when you're thinking about your life and where you're going, and if there's a discontent in that question, like, how did I even get here? And is this what I want to keep doing? It's those questions that are meant to get your attention. And that's really, I wrote the book about, the book is all about how this character gets invited to climb a mountain so they can have a conversation with their soul because they've been avoiding it, like most of us do. We avoid that appointment. We avoid that conversation because it's scary. It might tell us something that we don't want to hear. And it's just easier to just stick to the status quo, keep grinding.
First of all, I love when guests go on tangents because we explore so many different things. So don't feel bad that you just went away from the question, because actually,
Okay.
I love that you did that, because I'm going to tell you something something that we didn't share off cameras at all. But that thing that you said, okay, what if you lose a podcast, right? One thing that I realized last year was, okay, I'm not going to try to control anything, right? I'm not going to have a fixated goal in mind, because if I said, okay, my calling is a podcast. So my goal is to have one of the biggest podcasts in the world, be in the top 10 or top 100, top 5, or whatever. If I put myself in my brain, I'm going to ignore all the other signs of the universe telling me, hey, no, you just need to take this path or all this path, right? It's like the podcast is not going to be your ultimate goal. And I've realized that because at the end of last year, after doing the podcast for a year, I felt this, once again, that intuition to start trying public speaking. And as somebody who grew up for, stuttering a lot, having stage fright, even talking to people, because I used to get stuck a lot, I decided to go for it again, trusting my intuition. And I realized, once again, I was very good at communicating, at delivering a message, at teaching people. It's like using my own life, my own experience, and extracting the wisdom and the insights, not only that I've learned through my own life, but through the podcast as well. And help them just wake up, or help them get just planting a seed or an idea that maybe it will grow over time, and they will help them just snap out of it and just take more ownership and more agency of their life, and even coaching maybe in the future. So it's interesting how you mentioned that, because I've already been exploring those other paths and seeds. And I think that ultimately it's just going to be me as teacher, as a speaker, just either through coaching or just keynote, exploring topics and helping people in an easier, more digestible way without all the pain I had to go through, how they can just implement that into their life. So I love that, because that what I've told some of my friends based on my own experience, like, don't get fixated in one goal. As you said, almost in dating, don't get fixated in the perfect person or the perfect partner or the perfect job or the perfect purpose. Just be as allow yourself to mold and to flow through life, and just pay attention to the next aligned sign and just go with it. And and you won't be you won't attach your identity to something that you could lose. Like, imagine that tomorrow I cannot do the podcast anymore. Well, did I lose my purpose? No. Now I have other avenues to do so. And yes, going back, I went on a tangent, but going back to the answer that you gave me about, I think I wonder if people can bypass having a tough time in their life, whether a loss of a loved one or a health crisis or a breakup or divorce, or just even the lose their job. Can people truly avoid that and still find their purpose or a new direction for their journey, or do they have to go through tough times to finally wake up?
They don't they don't have to go through tough times, but it's just that tough times make us go inward, and we can be a little bit like a wounded animal, right? I'm going to retreat and let me think, like, what's going on? Like, that's when we begin asking the question. When everything's great, we don't think about these deeper things in life, and because we don't have to have a change. So unfortunately, it's going to take a crisis for most people to really change their path. And I love what you shared about getting into speaking. And I'm sure you can see that if we can start connecting the dots, right? It's not really about the podcast. It's about your heart to want to help people, to teach, to share, to be a messenger, to be that guide, right, in life. And I am betting, Daniel, if we did a little bit of archaeology and looked back in your life, we're going to find all of a sudden these breadcrumbs along the way, even from when you were little, that pointed at that. So, like for me, when I think about a lot of my life growing up, I wanted to be an archaeologist, but just because I saw Indiana Jones movies, right? So I was always excited about the concept of travel and exploring. But um, I grew up on a cattle ranch, shy kid, introverted. I would have never thought I would become a professional speaker, yet I did. But before that, I wanted to make movies. I wanted to be a movie director. I studied history in college and psychology because I love to learn how the brain works. So you start to piece all these things together, and you've got, here's this guy that likes stories, likes psychology, is fascinated to learn, loves the concept of helping people grow. And then if you look at the different careers I've done in my life, the ones that resonated the most, I was doing that just in different forms, whether that's writing a book, giving a speech, even though I'm not technically a speaker, I've just learned how to do it. Life gives us clues. And so if you're listening right now and you're wondering, like, well, I don't know what I should be doing with my life, maybe I hate my job or whatever it is, one of the things you can do is just go think about one of the best days that you had in your childhood. Not days, but like a specific day, and that's still so fresh in your memory. And go back to that and ask yourself, what were you doing? What was going on? And why did that give you such energy? And why is it still in your memory today? Because often those are those moments where, our life, we're always doing different things, but we cross over that activity that activates the soul. and that stays with us. And then we're doing something else, and then we're in the seventh grade and we do something and it activates the soul and we remember that moment. And those are clues. Those are clues for our life.
I love that. I loved how, even though when you were explaining that and when you're giving those examples, I was trying to remember a time in my life. I cannot think of one specifically, but one thing I will say is, and I've discussed it lately with people, is my I used to be ashamed of my insatiable curiosity, my my desire of going deep into conversations just to truly understand at a very root level things. Since I was like, I don't know, 8 or 12, and I kind of hid that part of me. I was kind of ashamed. People would make fun of me. People would feel like, oh, you're too much, too boring, or too intense. And just since I started the podcast, I realized, wait, that's a gift. That's my gift. Just exploring this, because if I understand at a deeper level, and if I ask the right questions, and if I explore, then I can extract the knowledge. And now, through my own storytelling, I can just teach that. And I get very excited when I learn something new that has helped me a lot. And the first impulse I have is just, I want to share with as many people. I just want to help them out and see if they can. Is when you see that light in their eyes when it just finally clicks, is just awesome. And I think that maybe even things that, and I'm going on a tangent here again, is sometimes the parts of ourselves that we don't like or we feel shame of are the ones that are actually gifts, but somebody couldn't receive it well, and then we thought that they were not good, and we hid them. So I would encourage people to start thinking about those things that they might not like about themselves, because that might be their gift and how they can use it or channel it to something greater in life. So I love that. But
You
I,
bring up a great
yeah, yeah,
point. I just want to make a comment about the gifts
yeah.
part because, I love talking about gifts and people's gifts, but we have to understand that everything's a two-sided coin. So even the things, as you said, that we're not proud of actually come with a gift on the other side of the coin. So let's say people pleasing. That's something I struggled with my entire life. Actually, it's still with me. So, but the thing about people pleasing, and for anyone listening, if you feel like, first of all, never say you're a people pleaser because that's such an identity thing. You just have a habit, right? You have a habit of people pleasing. But as much as that costs us a lot, costs us our authenticity, costs us, our living our own path, there's a gift to it as well. If you have the habit of people pleasing, you can walk into a room and just pick up on the vibe. You know who's not doing as good, because when you have people pleasing as a habit, you think, oh, maybe it's me they're not happy with, and then all of a sudden you go in there and you try to engage with them. Well, okay, that's not a great thing. At the same time, there's a gift that comes with that. So my imposter syndrome and insecurities turned into an ally with me speaking, because I was so devoted to the craft, because I didn't want to fail. I was so devoted to, like, I don't want to look stupid. So I just progressed so much faster than many of my peers, because I was like, I'm going to master this craft so I don't look stupid. Okay, well, maybe that motivation is not the best, but it also was a gift. So like you said, it's everything has two sides. Even the gifts have a weak side.
Hmm. I love that you brought that up, because I've been working on this idea, and I felt, and I don't know how, I mean, it's fascinating how it just connected from both angles, but of the parts of ourselves that we don't like. One, to me, because I feel that psychology says that we either have to love every part of ourselves or fix what we don't like. And to me, it was okay. What if some of the parts that we love or that we don't like about ourselves are the gifts, like my curiosity or your curiosity, or something that we are passionate about, but people couldn't receive it, and we just didn't know how to see it, because based on societal expectations, that wasn't good. But then there's the other parts that I would even argue that don't even that those parts don't even belong to us. Like the people pleaser, that was a survival adaptation that you as a kid had to develop to survive. Just if you felt that love was somewhat conditional, or maybe I'm not saying with your parents, but maybe with your friends or cousins or siblings or whatnot, you your brain is brilliantly adapted and created that behavior so you could survive. Now doesn't serve you anymore. However, as you said, there's a wisdom behind it. People pleaser, I can read a room, I can understand people's feelings, I can understand people's emotions, and my people pleasing self doesn't have to take the wheel. I can take the wheel. I can put my boundaries, but still use the wisdom. Or even the overthinker, I understand. I mean, it's almost like thanking them. I mean, thank you for helping me survive. Now, because I'm overthinking, I can analyze things at a deeper level, but I don't have to let it drive my life. And I think that with people pleasing, because I used to be one of them, I'm trying not to be as much. People tend to judge it a lot. It's like, no, thank that version of you because that was as a survival that you needed that. But don't feel ashamed of that. Now use the wisdom, as you said, that you learn from it, whether you're a perfectionist, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're an overthinker, whatever the case may be, understand that that was your brain help you make it through life. So I love that you said that because it connected both points I had from this idea. But going back to even being true to ourselves or living authentically, how does that actually look like? Because I'm obsessed with understanding concept at a deeper level. So people, for instance, if we talk about procrastination, if we talk about burnout, if we talk about alignments, like, okay, we sort of, or confidence, we sort of understand what they mean, but I want to go even a layer deeper to understand the behaviors associated with it so people know what to look for and they can embody better. So what does living authentically actually look like in daily life, not just as a concept?
So this goes back to when I mentioned about having a spiritual compass. And
Mhm.
that's where you start to think of what are the things that are most important to you. I like to think of roles as one of the things. I don't necessarily think of like creating a big list of values because to me that's just overwhelming. But for me in my life, I have seven commitments that I've made that relate with my spiritual compass. One is to honor the path of my soul and to um, be intentional about bringing my gifts to the world. I have a commitment to my health. I have a commitment to my children. I have a commitment to my partner. I have a commitment to my friends, right? And I have a commitment to generate wealth. And I have a commitment to honor God with my life. So those are my seven commitments. Now, each of those commitments is, well, what does that look like? And this is a great exercise, right? Where you sit down. So let's do the parent one. I'm a father of adult children. Well, what does that look like? First of all, what do I believe about that? Not what do my parents believe or what does some preacher tell me. What do I believe about being a parent of adult children and for who I am? Okay, well, it means this and this and this. Well, what does that look like? What does it look like, this area that I want in my life? Oh, I want to be part of my kid's story. I want to a good relationship with them. I want consistent contact with them. Okay, what's your commitment, James? What's your commitment to your children? This is my commitment, right? So I do that in every area. And now what I can do is weekly, bi-weekly, I can ask myself the question, am I keeping my commitments? Am I keeping my commitments? Oh, this commitment I've not been keeping. Okay, well, either we can do a deep dive on why, or we can just get back to it. But even each of these areas has a bunch of different qualities. Like I can break this down even further. So I continue to work on myself. But at the end of the day, what are your commitments and the follow up to that? And what are your reasons for keeping them? When you can have those two things, right? Like you need compelling reasons of why you're going to keep your commitments. And I've got 5 compelling reasons. And I have 5 compelling reasons to keep my 7 commitments. And that's my life. Like when I boil it all down, because, Daniel, my first career, I was a preacher, which is something I didn't think I would do. And I ended up doing that for a lot of years, which also means I got to officiate weddings and I also had to officiate funerals. And it's an interesting thing about a funeral, at least in the Christian tradition, is that when the funeral happens, someone gets up and they're going to read your eulogy, which is basically a list of everything you did in life. And it takes about 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And the rest of the hour is filled with people getting up talking about what you meant to them. If that's our final curtain call, that should tell us something about what's important now. So back to the question of what should I be doing? Try not to think of career first. First, think of what are my commitments that I'm making in my life? Why am I going to keep those commitments? Now, hey, what should I do? Because I got to make some money, right? I got to pay the bills. What should I do that's going to help me have a meaningful life, that's going to be aligned with my soul? So back to the alignment piece, to me, being aligned with your soul is where you are doing something that brings you energy. And I used to say it serves everyone. It doesn't even have to serve anyone, but it's that expression of you in the world. Like, everyone has a song to play, and no two songs are the same. And if you don't play your song, the world doesn't get to hear it. And if you're in some job that's below your potential and you're not happy, and yet you're afraid to make the change, I totally get that. But just understand, there's something more for you, right? There's something bigger for you. This is where we have to start tuning in and think, okay, what am I? Who am I called to be? And then what are some potential things I could do?
Well, I feel like what you're talking about is kind of like a paradigm shift that people, and that comes from, once again, I think, in my opinion, from societal conditioning or expectations that, okay, as you said, don't focus on your career, focus on what you truly want. And I would even go a step further, and I would suggest to people not to do it, not to put it as a goal or as a to-do list, in terms of the more pressure you put on yourself to figure out what you're supposed to do, the harder it is, because you're trying to force it. You need to let it just like almost surrender, kind of control, and it will come when it will come, as long as you are in stillness, as long as you are true to yourself and sit with yourself, and trying to go inwards and figure out what you truly want. And I love what you said about the funerals, because it's true. It's like almost nobody would care what you did in life. I mean, unless you impacted. Imagine, if you cure world hunger, okay, that's a different story, right? It's like, okay, cool. But for most people, it's all about, as you say, how you make people feel, the impact that you have in other people's lives on a personal level, rather than, okay, he had so many different houses or so much money, or he was a CEO of Fortune 500 company. Yeah, nobody cares, right? Or even if they care after a year, nobody cares. Like, nobody talks about the Queen of England anymore. Like, nobody talks about her because nobody cares. And and I had one more thought, but then I lost it. But anyhow, the whole point here is that, back to the commitments. I love how you broke it down into example. Like, I have 7 commitments, and this is how I want to live my life. And I think it's going to be uncomfortable for some people at the beginning, because we're not used to going that inwards. But we cannot live in vagueness, because when we live in vagueness, then we never live the life we want or we're supposed to live. And we just need to sit down, even in boredom, get comfortable with being bored, and wait until those answers slowly come up. And now I remember what it was about, to say to you about this. I don't know exactly how to sort of uh, phrase it, but it seems to me that the moment people tap into their inner world, energy, self, however you want to call it, thinks that everything starts changing almost rapidly, because it's almost like living, as you said, in that alignment, in that moment where things start clicking. But at the beginning, we will face a lot of pushback, I guess, from the ego, from the part of our brain that is trying to keep us safe. When you talk about climbing a mountain, not only in your life but in your book, and I wonder how does the climbing itself, the challenges, the setbacks, and the solitude mirror the process of inner transformation.
Yeah, the book's called The Call to Climb. But the idea, of course, is a metaphor. But the idea is that we're all born to walk uphill, right? We're all born to climb, to embrace a challenge. No one will enjoy their life if they are born into luxury and they just live there. What a sad existence, right? If just all your needs are cared for. But we are better versions of ourselves when we're striving, when we're facing a bit of a headwind. We can't have it all the time, right? We need those moments of recharge and refueling. But it's the climb. And if there's not something currently difficult in your life, then find something difficult to do, right? Do hard things. And whether that's, I'm going to start cold plunging, or I'm going to actually go climb a mountain, I'm going to do something that makes me think of quitting. Because it's in those moments that then we have to, as we say, dig deep, which is let me figure out, let me make a decision now who I'm going to be. Typically throughout the day, we don't have to make those decisions. We're just going with the flow. But we need those moments. This is, to me, is how we chisel out who we're really supposed to be. Is we have to have those moments of, I don't want to do this anymore. So now what am I going to do? Right? And sometimes it's physical pain with a physical challenge, but more times than not, it's an emotional pain, mental pain, right? I don't want to put my hand up at the meeting with the executives and share my idea because I'm scared to do that. Okay, well, that's a hard thing. That's a mini mountain for you. Great, go. You're called to climb. So let's go do that. And let's sign up for something. Let's go volunteer to lead something where now all these eyes are on you. And the night before, you're like, why did I sign up for this? Why did I can't wait for this to be over. What a beautiful place to be in those moments, because that's where we're growing.
It sounds to me like using fear as a compass, that whatever the fear is, just follow that path, right? Just embrace it and lean more into that. And yes, I think that we can have a physical pain, mental pain, but I think the emotional pain is one of the hardest things to overcome, or just to bypass or to push through. And yes, it's funny because I was listening yesterday this podcast called Ologies, and they were talking about fears. And the person that we're interviewing, she said that most successful people use the word fear or afraid or scared a lot because that's when you know that you're expanding. People who are not as successful use that as, no, I'm stressed instead of I'm scared, because you know that if you're scared or if you're afraid, that's your moment of expansion. That's the moment that you need to step into the unknown, into the uncertainty, and see that that fear was just in your head and it wasn't that bad. But then it gives you the tools, whether at a skill level, at a mental mindset, or anything, to, okay, I can do this, I can do hard things. And yeah, I can. Sometimes it's hard, and to me, the way that I've sort of broken down in my life is, okay, if I'm so scared about doing something, let me do two things. One, write down a list of all the hard things I've done in my life, all the hard challenges, things I've overcome, just to prove to myself you have what it takes. And second, break down the fear into smaller parts and just take one tiny step, and start taking, even if it's embarrassingly small, just take that tiny step, and you'll see how slowly but surely you will overcome that fear. It could be just raising your hand at a meeting, it could be launching your business, it could be ending that relationship, whatever the case may be. But I wonder, and we're getting close to an end. But I wonder what inspired you, what motivated you to write the call to climb, because I love how you phrased it in the email that it was like it's sort of the alchemist meets Carl Jung. I was like, okay, I need to sort of know what was the inspiration behind it and how you came up with that idea.
The call to climb came out of my own burnout at 35 or whatever age I was, and I was not happy in my career. And then like one day my body just crashed, and I'm like a healthy guy and fit and in shape, and I could hardly get out of bed for 3 months. And I thought I'd like broke my body. I thought they were testing me for lupus and cancer, and they're like, no, you got nothing. And then it was that moment I thought, okay, something's wrong on the inside. And anyways, I stumbled across the work of Dr. James Hollis. He's a Jungian psychoanalyst. He's written 25 books. I encourage you guys to read anything that he writes. But I read a book called Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. Well, classic Jungian, he talks about the soul of the psyche and how, but he was the one that gave me the idea that the soul is summoning you to an appointment to have a conversation because you're not listening and you're just living this life according to your programming and your loops. But there's something bigger for you. There's a larger life for you to step into, but you've got to come to the meeting, the appointment. So over the next decade, as I studied his work and I thought about and, tried to improve my own life, I love that concept of showing up to the meeting with your soul. And so the book came out of someone who was living out of alignment, not really happy with their job, and they stumble into this remote village in the Bolivian Andes, only to find out that they've been expecting them. Because in this village, there's this mystical mountain that calls people to climb when they need to have a conversation with their soul. And the entire climb is all about this coming back to yourself, right? Shedding the life that you think you're supposed to live and really finding your authentic path. So that's what the book's about. It was really fun to write. It just came out. This is what it looks like, but yeah, that's where the book came from.
I love that story, and I'm very excited to start reading it. I know I have a bunch of books, but probably I need a quote unquote fiction book to just because I read a lot of nonfictions because I want to learn a lot. But yeah, I love the inspiration behind it. I love the story, and sometimes the answers are simpler than we're expecting them to be. But because of the simplicity, we think that they're not true or they're not the things that we need to follow. So I think I'm really hoping and wishing that when people read your book or read the work of Dr. Hollis, I think that hopefully they will not only get inspired by it, but then they would sense that they have a lot of agency in their life and they have a lot of control on how they can create a life worth living for them, and going back to almost like a full circle, that you don't have to live a life that you hate, because what's the point of living if that's the thing? James, I wish I could have you longer, but as a closing question, if somebody listening feels kind of like a quiet inner whisper telling them there's like more to life, what's the first step you would encourage them to take towards answering that call?
I would say get on a plane and go to the mountains and find a mountain that is appropriate for your skill level and go and climb, because it doesn't have to be an actual mountain. You need to get out of your environment that you're currently in. You need to get to a place where you can reflect and be alone. And sometimes it's not even asking the right question. It's just trusting, like, hey, something is not right. Something is off. I need answers. I trust you'll give them to me when it's time. But until then, I'm gonna go climb this mountain. That would be maybe the best thing I could encourage someone to do.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that. I love that. James, where can people find you, work with you, or buy your book? Anything?
Thanks for asking, Daniel. For the book on the call to climb, you can go to the website iwillclimb.com, iwillclimb.com. And then from there, you can find my other companies and the leadership speaking and stuff I do. But since this conversation was about the soul and living our life, go to iwillclimb.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll add all of those to the show notes, YouTube description, and I'm definitely buying your book. Because now I want to, I want to read that story. And once again, James, I have to bring you back because, as I said before we started recording, I had more questions that I didn't going to have the time to ask all. But yes, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Daniel, thanks for having me on your show. Take care.